Hi there. It's Karen Rands, of course, here with the Compassionate Capitalist podcast and video. So today's topic, I had a break in some of my interviews that were scheduled with guests that I normally would do for the Compassionate Capitalist podcast show, highlighting, business issues, creating wealth through investing in entrepreneurs, how to be successful as an entrepreneur and scale to a business that you can exit and bring a return on your time and money and investment, back to your family to turn around and be an investor or to start another business or buy another business, right? Wealth, you know, pay it forward and create more wealth with the wealth that you create. But there's been a lot of information of late regarding cancel culture. Okay. This cancel culture thing. And, as with other things, it can kind of take on its life of its own. And I decided I'd had a couple of conversations with people about this topic, on what does it really mean. I did a podcast a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, with the Business Vision out of the UK, and it was a topic of conversation there. And so I wanted to take some time in my normal Tuesday schedules to share with you my thoughts as a compassionate capitalist and somebody who understands and embraces the idea of conscious capitalism as well. And how does that relate to this idea of a cancel culture? So, in order to do that, I needed to be able to define some things so we're all on the same page. And then I'm going to give you some business perspective and economics perspective of what should be considered a cancel culture effect or phenomena within the context of capitalism and our society, what we strive to do as an enlightened society. So, all right, so here we go. So as we define cancel culture, okay, so like the official, definition of this, it's an extension of the contemporary evolution of a much bolder set of social processes that we can see in the form of banishment, and they're designated to reinforce the set of norms. All right, so the idea of cancel culture has taken on a whole new perspective in the last few years because of the amplification that happens with social media. So if you think about what the original definition of canceling is, it was, when a show would get canceled, right? Because there wasn't enough viewership for it. There wasn't, they couldn't sell the advertising on that show to make money to support the show. So one of the basic premise through all of what I'm going to talk about is the flow of money. Okay, money, cash is king, and money dictates all of almost everything in uh, when you have a stick or a carrot, right? The stick might be to cancel something, but I'm going to talk about the carrot of how we can use this concept of our cash and create a carrot versus just the stick. So canceling was just always canceling of a show. Might run a little while. In some cases, stars just didn't want to do it anymore, so they would finish out a season. That kind of a thing. And it was really just sort of that kind of canceling. And then it kind of went into this definition that became more of like a politically correct deal, right? So you started to have a few people that was sort of the court of public opinion would cancel somebody. So somebody might lose Twitter followers or social media followers, or because they were going to boycott. If you remember that term, so instead of, if I didn't like what a certain celebrity said in the past, we might write letters or things like that. But within social media, we would just unfollow. Okay. So you'd see somebody that had gotten into a spat with somebody a little bit more powerful on Twitter, and all of a sudden you'd have this fight going on and people would like unfollow. So their social media influence would seem to drop because they wouldn't have as many followers. It was always measured by what's your social media influence. But keep in mind, just because somebody follows you or likes you or joins you on something or likes your page does not mean that they're buyers. And all it is an electronic on or off switch. That's all it is. So it really has very little impact in the big scheme of things. Okay, but as we went into going into 2017, a lot of this changed, and social media as well as traditional media influenced it and probably stoked the fires quite a bit. But there was also there's this idea of you think about the power of the purse, right? It goes back to it because if you think about boycotts and years ago, we didn't think cancel wasn't really the term because it was just a media term of a TV show or something like that, or a character that would get canceled or killed within a show because maybe that star, they needed to write them out of that. We saw that with Kevin Spacey's thing. He just got written out of that show. The show stayed on, that character got written out because of his indiscretions and his behavior that people believed was not something that was worthy of supporting and uplifting and encouraging and condoning. Okay. So boycotts, think about it. And apartheid, it who knows how long that would have gone on had a huge consumer base in the American culture boycotted companies that were selling goods there. I remember when the Coca-Cola boycott came out because they wanted Coca-Cola to pull out of South Africa to influence the stop apartheid, to make changes there within the government and the incarceration of Nelson Mandela. Okay, so there was the power of the purse influenced that. We've seen it when it comes to influencing behaviors at government levels. Governments will have boycotted products and goods and services of other countries because of behavior that they did. They boycotted the Olympics because of the Russian behavior. They've boycotted back a long time ago. They influenced Germany, or tried to, by boycotting Nazi products, right? Or companies that carried that, or countries in the products that they produced, if they supported that. So boycott has been something that's been very powerful. But it also, you think about when you have a discretion on where you can spend your money. Sometimes a boycott becomes not really a boycott when it's not widely adopted because people don't have a strong passion for that, or they like that product enough they're going to, not, adhere to their values when it comes to that, and like, for example, there's been a lot of boycotts called off and on over time to deal with the like if a particular fast food had racist tendencies or supported certain campaigns or donated to certain things. But those of us that understood that and said, look, it's you can't. A lot of these, like particularly franchises, they're locally owned. They may not be owned by a big conglomerate. So pointing a finger at somebody in a big conglomerate has no impact on that local business. And it could have a negative impact on that small business owner who has nothing to do that and maybe have not participated in any of the transgressions that the bigger umbrella has said to have done, right? And so you've had a whole move from that, but then as a result of awareness and people realizing how they came together and the influence that they can have, and organizations that would have supported that celebrity, for example, Bill Cosby, because of his being a sexual predator, Roseanne Barr, because of her racist comments, She got her show went on in a different format. Charlie Sheen, right? We kind of went a little crazy. And so they kept that show going because he became a liability to the brand, the franchise of that show. And, because of just the things that he was saying and doing. We had seen even Kathy Griffin, right? Holding the simulation of a beheaded president. That was just horrible for everybody. That should have been horrible for everybody. And if you're going to have that bar and standard there, you also have to have the bar and standard of those people that, tried to storm the Capitol with the goal to bind, kidnap, assassinate representatives of our in our Congress, as well as the Vice President of the United States. That's a capital crime. And so those are things that you can see where people get in their influence. So, like, for example, the term cancel culture started to become something that kind of took vogue with this rise of Karens. And as a Karen, I can say I would really appreciate. I just want to say, everybody, right now, if you're going to use that term to describe somebody's behavior, then use it within the context of what it was originally used for. And that was people that were complaining to authorities about a person of color's behavior or presence in front of them, and they would freak out and do these things, and also call the manager. Well, it originally started to call the manager, and it was because of this person that they had this irrational reaction to. But then also it became something with refusal to wear masks as well. And those are the kind of the context as it is. Don't just randomly throw it around because you don't like somebody's behavior or reaction, or you don't think their response is politically correct because they disagree with you. It's in those contexts, because I have no problem for people being called Karen using my name, because I don't do any of that stuff, right? And so, but it got really amplified. So, for example, if you think about the Karen of Central Park, this was the person, I think real name was Felicia, who had called the cops on this African American man that was bird watching in Central Park, falsely accused him of attacking her, freaked out in the way she held her dog, all that kind of stuff, right? So after a million views, she lost her job. She got a charge with filing a false report of a crime. She got her dog taken away from her. All that stuff. If she had done that, if she had acted that way to somebody in her workplace, she would have gotten fired anyway. But they didn't know, as a private person, that she held those kind of beliefs, that she would take that kind of action. The people with the on the dog thing, had somebody seen her beating her dog or strangling her dog, they might have reported her to the Humane Society, but it wouldn't have gotten that kind of reaction that it got, except that it was within social media. So the thing that we have seen, that social media, the ability that anybody that has a phone out there has made people aware of things that they weren't aware of before as much. They operated in their own little cocoon, their bubble of what they felt reality or reality was, their story they told themselves, that all police were there to serve and protect, that many people did not, if they hadn't had a lot of interaction with people of color, they did not know of the fear that people of color lived in as a result of things that they had experienced within their community, and even personally with the certain select, not a minority of police officers that held a racial bias that would react to people of color in a certain way, that they would not have acted that same way if it was a white person there, quite frankly, right? I have been aware of that, and I've done another segment on this for decades. For decades, people I worked with at IBM, my African American, my black friends that, come back from lunch and they would have had this horrible encounter for no apparent reason, just because of the car they drove. It didn't, it just, that stuff has existed. It just never got amplified through the lens of a video or a picture being taken that then had a platform of social media to be broadcast and shared and commented and reshared and amplified. So it raises the consciousness of the society, which led to the Black Lives Matter marches all through the summer and the peaceful protests. We're not going to get all into, how media has portrayed that or misportrayed some of those things, but it raised people awareness. The Me Too movement, right? So you saw people get canceled. The presidents and founders of companies got canceled because they were a public company, and that person that was the spokesperson, like in Papa John's, for example, that spokesperson became a harmful to the value of the stock. Again, it goes back to dollars and cents, right? The power of the purse. And if people had the ability to purchase other pizzas, lots of pizza options out there. So if you're going to choose to direct your dollars, which I'm going to get into more in a minute, you can choose to direct them in a positive way. All right. So that's the cancel culture that became that, and it just got dubbed that. Anytime somebody didn't like the fact that they felt another entity was negatively impacting somebody that they supported, ergo supported the words and actions of that person, it got it got labeled cancel culture instead of looking at the underlying reasons and what does that mean. And so let's talk about what is compassionate capitalism. I define it all the time, but within this context, it's people that are directing how they spend their investment dollars and what they spend their investment dollars on. They can buy stocks, public stocks. There's a lot of movement now. And I've done shows on this where we talk about how to be thoughtful about how you purchase your stocks and be looking at the underlying what's the what is the what is the market that they serve, how do they serve that, which leads into conscious capitalism. We'll get into it. Are their practices sustainable? Do they uplift people? And so you choose to direct how you spend your investment dollars. Um, Same way with it leads into what my personal perspective on compassionate capitalism is people learning how and striving to invest in entrepreneurs. Now we saw, and that's of course the reason why I wrote the book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, is to give people a primer that are ready to expand their investment portfolio or their strategy to not just invest in public stocks and real estate or Bitcoin, for example, but also invest in entrepreneurism, invest in the growth of jobs in our economy, a growth in bringing innovation and novel concepts out, or a novel business in an area that needs it, even if it's a local business down the street. So that is what compassionate capitalism is, and how you choose to spend your money. Well, one of the things that came out of not only the Me Too movement, in which we saw that cancel stuff that we talked about for sexual harassment and things like that. But it's equality. Equality became something that was of importance to people, and racial justice became something that was very important to investors. And we saw that when they looked at, all of a sudden there was this awakening, if you will, within the capital communities that 3% of all of the money that angel investors and VCs that, on record, only 3% of that went into women-owned businesses, right? It has bumped up in certain markets. It might be 7% or 8%, but it was still not in the double digits. And guess what? African-American businesses were even less than that, right? So, when they look at all minorities that count as 8A, all minorities are your American Indian, Hasidic Jews, women, um, uh, Black-owned businesses, Hispanic-owned businesses. All of that counts. But even when you look at all minorities, okay, it still is only about 18%. And so what you had was an awakening within the capital communities that said, and I did a show on this. Okay, if you're going to be a compassionate capitalist, if you're going to be a conscious capitalist, which I'm going to explain in a minute, then you need to carve out some portion of the dollars that you're going to invest and proactively try to find companies that would meet this minority status. Your business criteria doesn't change. You don't lower your standards so that you could invest in a minority or woman owned business. You have the same standards, but you are proactive in identifying and attracting and inviting those businesses to come into your world of your capital world, right? If they're pretty good and they just miss one little thing because they haven't been enshrined in a culture of entrepreneur development, right? We can look back at STEM teaching and know that women and minorities have not heavily participated in engineering, mathematics, and technology programs in our schools because, quite frankly, they were discouraged from participating. It's only of late that outside influencers have raised the bar of our K through 12 schools to encourage that participation and provided extracurricular activities for those that wanted to, that were not able to get it in the traditional education system, to go outside of their education system and get those skills. Summer camps, after school programs, things like that. Think of Black Girls Who Code, right? That organization, I'm not exactly sure how old it is, but it's only about 5, maybe 7 years old, and really only gained a lot of momentum in the last 3 years, right? So we have, within this last few years, our awareness has gone up. And now if you go out there and you look, you see, I would say that uh, at least once a month, starting in about, and sometimes one, at least every other week, starting in probably about May timeframe, maybe June, I would say May, June timeframe, I started getting invited to venture capital and angel investor pitch events that were all just minority, right? They were all just minority. They were all just women owned businesses. Um, and I've seen lots of panels where people have talked about the challenge of finding businesses that are women and minority owned to consider for investments. And there's a whole chicken and egg kind of a thing going on. There's a lot of new VCs that have opened up that are just that, or angel groups that are just women. I've interviewed a number of women angel leads of angel investor groups on my show. I hope you'll go and listen to more of the Compassionate Capitalist podcast as part of that. So that's a thing that like investors can do that put your money to work in a good way. And so what does that mean from a conscious capitalism standpoint? So conscious capitalism is when business owners, founders, the C-suite of a large company set within their direction, their mission, their purpose, their corporate culture mandates, that they are going to operate in such a way that they pay their people more, they make sure that the vendors that they do business with are environmentally friendly, or at least they don't harm the environment, that they are uplifting and fair to their employees, that they give equal opportunity to their employees. Even though there's, gay marriage is legal in the United States, there are still a number of states that do not recognize gay marriage, or businesses themselves that do not recognize gay partners and gay spouses for benefits, right? So if that's something that's important for you, you as a conscious capitalist or a compassionate capitalist can choose, or a conscious consumer can choose how you spend your money to make sure that those businesses that you spend your money at are doing the things that you want to do, and let the free markets cancel businesses and cancel, as it does now, cancel shows, right? Because somebody would boycott a show because the people kept that company, that person in the place that had shown that they were not living or striving to live an enlightened world. Right? So they let the dollars do the talking. So conscious capitalism, again, it's all about, and your influence in the community. It's how you lift up those internally within your organization, those that you do business with outside of it, and then how you treat the people within your community. And it's all leading towards what we kind of call enlightenment. All right. So what is enlightenment? So enlightenment is, by definition, uh, reason becomes the primary source of authority and legitimacy. So using reason. So some people would say, well, reason is science. In some cases, reason is common sense, right? So the four tenets of it, or the main things that or pillars of, pillars of enlightenment, which came out of Europe in I think in the 18th century, and we have been striving towards it ever since. We continue to strive to. Sometimes when I talk to people, I think about some of these science fiction movies or Star Trek or something like that, where there's women leaders and they're where everybody gets along, there's peace, there's mediation, there's uplifting. In that case, part of the thing I always struggle with when it comes to racism, we all bleed red, right? The only difference is what's around our bodies, you know what I mean? This skin thing, and maybe their hair, kinds of stuff, right? But it's like if you were going to say that all, and I guess some cultures have tried to do this, blue eyes are superior to brown eyes, right? I think that was a little bit of the Nazi tenets, right? So, is a purity of blue eyes. So, there is reason and science that says that's not the case. All right. Science. So liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity. That means treating people like your brother. Okay. Treating each other one like that. Separation of church and state, and a constitutional government. That's enlightenment. That's what we have been striving for. Our forefathers in the United States have been set the groundwork for when they came over here and fought for their independence from Britain. It was so that we could pursue enlightenment within the United States. And 200 some odd years later, we're still struggling to get to that point. And what happened on January 6th is such a clear example that we're not done. Okay. So what I would like to put out there, and sort of my call to action, is that if you are one that believes that we should strive towards this, we don't, what is this? It's not a utopia, but this more enlightened society, so that we have liberty, we have freedom to express ourselves, we have freedom to gather, we have freedoms, we have free press, okay? We have freedoms, right? But its progress says that we are going to pursue the things that uplift others. That's our fraternity, right? We will have tolerance for those that are different from us, whether it's race, religion, sex, sexual orientation. That's a tolerance for those things that, because of science, do not make sense, to be intolerant of them. It's not reasonable to be intolerant of those. What's reasonable is to be intolerant of people that try to use race as a reason not to do something, or race to keep somebody from their pursuit of liberty. That's intolerance, and that is not rational. Okay. So that's what we're striving for. So what does that mean when it comes to a cancel culture? Or, quite frankly, right? So what has happened is what we've seen lately as a society, as individuals and businesses become more aware and more knowledgeable about the ills within our community. So many people, and they still right now struggle with this idea of redlining, because for those of us that have this sense of tolerance, this sense of righteous equality, we cannot fathom sanction government rules that would intentionally prohibit members of our society for being able to pull a seat up to the table and participate in everything that our democracy offers. We have seen it over time as we've gone through this, getting the right to vote, right? You know? And so redlining was something that has had a profound impact on our society. And I only found out, I mentioned this in a previous podcast that I did, redlining still existed in Atlanta, where I live, that has been considered a very tolerant city. It was one of the, Martin Luther King's birthplace. It was an area that it was too busy to hate, was this idea, okay? Because we were about business. And that was yet, unbeknownst to a lot of people, except for the people that were being impacted by it, which were people of color, redlining went on in Atlanta until 2017, right? Just 3-4 years ago. It was still a guy from a major bank told me that, because we were talking about opportunity zone funds, and I couldn't understand why some of these areas had not been developed or had not just stayed, thriving. And that it was because of that, right? So the pandemic shone a light on those communities, the lack of um of access to the internet impacting the education, the lack of health care or ability to get health care in a lot of our communities. That had light, shined light on that. And so what has happened with them, this we now have an enlightened group of, folks that look like me, that have said we have to step up and use the power of the purse to invest in businesses that are going to help solve these problems, and make sure we spend our money with companies that are not a hindrance to our progress, in the way that they treat their employees, in the way they make their products and deliver their products, in the way that they the delta. I don't know if Bank America has changed them, but if you saw those congressional hearings, it was like 100 times delta change between what that clerk in the bank made and what the president made. And they were called to the table to address that. And I don't bank there because of practices that I have felt that were harmful to small businesses and were harmful to me as a small business owner, that Bank America did during the recession. And I felt that their founder, I mean, not the founders, their C-suite were not reasonable, not enlightened, not fair, not just nothing about the way they handled their affairs during the recession was good. And I have since taken my business elsewhere. Now I can't stop other people from doing business there, because sometimes that's a convenience. So it's not something that they're aware of. They like the habit that they're in, and they may choose to stay, and that's okay too. Okay. But you think about, if you look at people, business, investors seeking to lead a more enlightened life in the way that they choose to spend their money, this is a free market, and this is what capitalism is all about. Okay. Libertarian, it says we will strive to be the best that we can be, and then how we use our money. So in theory, they're like, oh, we don't need to protect certain lands because people will naturally want to respect the natural resources there. But in reality, there is greed out there in capitalism, without a doubt, that we've given them an opportunity to go make money by, let's just say, fracking on federally protected lands. They will go do that. And you can choose. Some people applaud that. They can run a pipeline through sacred Indian territories, American Native Indian territories, and pay the people for those land use. But in reality, they have harmed that community in a great way, right? They were not operating as conscious capitalists or compassionate capitalists. They were greedy. Okay. And there is a difference there, and you can choose to take your actions accordingly. So, but you also got to think about the people that sometimes wanted to defend. They will turn and twist the words to defend the actions of those greedy corporations in order to create to justify another belief that they have. They don't believe Indians, Native American Indians, are as worthy of people as people that look like me, that they maybe are not in, they're there stuck on those reservations because they choose to be stuck there. They choose to be supported by our, our government set asides and subsidies and things like that. In reality, they don't. That's a whole nother conversation that's very similar to the race conversations of redlining and racial bias. But they may choose that, and it all gets into all this other kinds of stuff that's emotionally connected. But I want to put out to you sort of a story, because part of what elevated this idea of cancel culture was the response to the insurrection on January 6th. And, businesses that said they were no longer going to give donations to certain candidates because they did not denounce that. They continued to perpetuate lies that led to that insurrection. So many of those people truly believed that they were doing the right thing because they had been misled by politicians and people that had a microphone, different media sources that have free reign because they're not judged by the same standards as traditional media, because they can start a video podcast, they can start an audio podcast with no money down and get a following, and nobody is checking and balancing them on their lies. Used to be that radio stations would cancel. I remember, I forget his name now, Imker maybe, that Imger, they canceled him because he said some really horrible racist things about some players on the women's basketball league, and he got canceled, right? He got canceled. His show got canceled. These radio stations have come out now and said, if you continue to perpetuate these lies, then you will get canceled from us. But there is still voices out there that all they have to have is an internet connection. And so you have to assess who you listen to and how you listen to, and if you're only listening to that one source when it comes to getting your news and your facts, and try to find ones that have always been an arbiter of truth. They don't, straight up AP, right? NPR, right? Some of these other places that, really try to make sure that it's just the facts, Jack. They don't put opinions out there. A lot of what you get on your news channels these days, if it's not the 6 o'clock news, is going to be opinions. And so, all right. So let's talk about Mr. Pillow, right? Mr. Pillow got canceled supposedly because of his political affiliation. But what was it really? What was it really? Right? Well, if you look at him, he was really the seen on TV guy, right? He had patented a pillow back in 2004 that was based off of the form of it and holes in it and things like that. And he was selling it through kiosks, not doing really well with it, selling it at state fairs and farmers markets and all around Minnesota, until he did his first infomercial in 2011, and it exploded, right? He went to 30 million in sales in just a few years after that, within a few years. Okay. But then he started to get sued because of false claims of medical results, that it cured different diseases or ailments, and false advertising, because he always said it was like a promo, get it now, two for this price. But that's really, after you do that for a decade, then that's really the new price. It's no longer a promo price, so it's false advertising. But because of his influence, and in part sales, right? 2017, he was brought into retail stores. He had never been in any of these retail stores there, but I think part of it was there were people that were wondering if they could get it locally. They wanted to touch it and feel it and not just, see the ads on TV. When a number of advertisers had stepped away from some of the Fox host shows, there was a gap of advertising time available, and he stepped in to fill it. So he became very much associated with a certain way of thinking within our community. His alliances with President Trump also contributed to that. And he became sort of a spokesperson, if you will, for some of the former president's policies and views and beliefs. And he was able to get into retail boxes because of this sort of momentum. And granted, he was well known. His ads were well known. $30 million. That's nothing to sneeze at that he was doing, right? But even though in 2016, a report by Consumer Reports said that only 30% of the people that had bought his pillow would buy his pillow again. So that just tells you it wasn't a great product. And he decided to expand into sheets, and I guess he actually started making masks too, probably because he got a government contract to do that. So he got he did all this stuff, but he took his eye off the ball as a businessman. He didn't continue to listen to his customers. He was not a compassionate capitalist or a conscious capitalist, listening to his customers, making sure the way he treated his employees, the way he treated his customers with truth and honesty. He didn't do those things, right? Case in point, the lawsuits that were settled against him. And Better Business Bureau took him down from an A to an F in 2017, about the time he was getting into some of these retail stores. So when the decision came out right after January 6th to stop carrying, and I think it started with Bed Bath and Beyond, then it was Kohl's, and then it was like a dominoes effect, because there's safety in numbers. If everybody's going to do this, then we can all do this. And it shows that we support our democracy, we support truth in advertising, we support truth in our media. We want to hold our public officials and the media accountable to tell truth to the people that are listening. So we, participants in an enlightened society, can use reason and science to make our own decisions about the things that we want to participate in and what we want to do. We want that. We rely on places like Better Business Bureau and consumer advertising organizations to tell us, are these ads that these companies are they true or not? And if you can't rely on that truth, then you're operating in the dark, and you're no longer enlightened. You're entering into the dark ages again, right? And we don't want to do that, right? There's a lot of death and destruction in the dark ages. And so I want to say that it's less about punishing the people that say or do racist things, right? If you seek to, perspective on this, or supports them choosing to direct your dollars, be them. So it's less about punishing people, but uplifting. This is the difference between the carrot and the stick. You punish because you can boycott, or you can, call attention to the bad actions of somebody, like the Karen of Central Park, right? You can call out when murder has been committed by a police officer on a person of color. You can call that out. You can use your voice on media to do that when it's really clear what they did, because you can see with your own eyes what they did. And what we saw happen on January 6th, we saw with our own eyes that what those people did, and the same way that they stormed the Capitol in Minnesota and tried to kidnap the governor there, the harm that they would choose to do to our elected officials, the harm that they would try to do to our democracy, is not something that we want to accept and condone. That's it, right? So as businesses choose to not support those politicians, whereas before they did not know to the extent that they were not an enlightened politician, that they supported these contrary to Enlightenment viewpoints and perpetuated the lies that would harm our democracy, that would limit our liberty, that would limit our progress, that would harm our Constitution, right? When they saw that, they choose no longer to spend their money with there, and they will just spend it in other places. So it comes across as a cancel, but in reality, what they're doing is choosing a carrot. So, like, for example, Anhydrous Bush is not doing all of their big announcements of a new product or a new line on, they're not canceling the Super Bowl. They're choosing to redirect their advertising dollars towards ads um, that will uplift the progress of our society by promoting the science of what we need to do to stop this pandemic, what we need to do to prevent the spread. That's all the things, the social distance, the masks, keep it outside kind of things. And we're the vaccine. People need to get the vaccine. There's a lot of science that supports the safety of the vaccine. The people that have an irrational fear of it, they need to go and do their own research on it. And yes, you'll see a link of somebody that says this or that or the other. But if you go into the scientific journals on it, if you talk to real medical professionals that have done their own scientific studies on it and looked at it, you can go to PubMed, Medline. It's National Library of Medicine, part of the National Institute of Health. It's funded by your tax dollars. Every peer reviewed, meaning other scientists have looked at these studies and accepted them and say they are true. Then you can get real science, right? Peer reviewed means other scientists have reviewed it for the methods that they used, the scientific method that has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years as the accepted norm and the way we try to prove if something is right or not. Okay. So those are the things that you can do on this. And Anheuser-Busch is choosing to redirect their dollars towards that will help us progress as an enlightened society. And so I encourage you to consider for yourself whether you want to say you're a conscious consumer, a conscious capitalist, a compassionate capitalist, even a compassionate consumer, that you choose to spend your dollars in an affirmative way for the values that you hold dear, and let the free enterprise system, the libertarian system that says people will be rewarded for good behavior and good actions and good decisions that positively impact their community and society at large. And is through uplifting and using our dollars. We don't cancel anybody. We just redirect it to promote the values that we hold dear in our current American striving to be more enlightened society. And that's all I have to say. I have more notes, but I believe my point has been made. And I want you to understand when you use those terms, to look back. Sometimes people just, his business just started to fail because he took his eye off the ball on what it was that he was trying to get done. He just was, it wasn't a good business to begin with. Talking about Mr. Pillow, of course. All right. And so um, continue on. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening to this. That was that one little final thought. I should have wrapped it up sooner than that because I think I finished high there. But sometimes I realized I didn't finish out my point on that particular thing. I want you to be consistent and in authentic in what you hold valuable And then therefore, as you choose to spend that, and whether that comes down to the local businesses that you go to, be conscious of the reasons why you shop there or you don't shop there, right? And there's all kinds of opportunities to direct your cash. Your cash is king. And one of the things I like to direct you to is to go buy my book, please. Yes, learn whether what is investing in entrepreneurs. You can do it as Reg CF for easy as $500, $200 a month, and make a lot of investments, small investments to save up to be bigger investments. But it's something that everybody can do. That's a great economic democratization of the capital markets. Everybody has the potential to share in the success of other entrepreneurs that are working hard to be successful. And you can choose to spend your dollars that way, just like you choose to buy their product because you believe in what it is that they're doing. And I want to encourage you all to do that. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please give me the 5-star thumbs up and share this podcast.